Make sure crisp is working properly.
Yep. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today we have Water Vikings legend and general good guy PJayo on. Say hi, PJayo.
What's going on?
And I brought him here today, for one, because he had offered he wanted to speak about things in business and CPA. And for two, I think he has some very interesting positions that can be taken up when it comes to armies, when it comes to the politics and media and armies, and the whole shebang of how this shithole operates, frankly. And I specifically wanted to talk about a couple things, ranging from army stuff to media stuff, but to start off, I guess we'll talk about, the elephant in the room, Legends Cup. How do you feel about Legends Cup this year?
It's pretty cool. I mean, okay, how do I feel about Legends Cup? I think it was a little messy for sure. I'm being light on that. I think there was a lot of problems that happened, but I think ignoring that, saying that I got to lead a Legends Cup final, I mean, how many people can say they did that?
Exactly.
I'm very, very happy that I got to do that. Of course, I'm a little upset that we didn't win, but at the same time, I'm glad it was Templars and not, RPF 3-0ing us again.
Yeah. I mean, hey, first time in 7 years you make it there.
Yeah. It's been a long time. It's been a long time coming. So I'm glad that I got to lead this one.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe a few years from now, someone else will lead WV to victory after.
It's bound to happen eventually, right?
It has to. I mean, I wouldn't say it has to because ACP.
Legends Cup can run for 100 years. If Legends Cup continues for 100 years, eventually you have to win once.
Well, I don't know about that because I think there's going to come a point where armies will just be swapped out for other armies. I think.
Yeah, there will come a time where the old guard loses its power, and I think we saw that especially with RPF and IW recently.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I wouldn't even say IW. I would say RPF and ECP because these two have been
on top for a decade. Isn't it wild that the army that is crushing everybody right now is a private server era army?
Yeah. The fact that it's Templars is certainly surprising to say the least.
Yeah, I remember when Templars was founded. I mean, I remember fighting against Gen 1 Templars in World War VII in 2018. I remember beating Zing in battle myself.
I did that many times.
Yeah, I'm 2-0. I've only ever fought with him twice, but I'm 2-0 against him, and it was under the worst possible circumstances. I was 12. Did I ever tell you the story behind that?
I don't think you did.
Well, layman's terms, to save time, I was on... Actually, Dino was there.
Okay.
I was on CPO, I think, I was on the private server with Dino, Lit7, and our other friend Getalife, because we were all, a friend group in RPF back then, because we were all fucking kids. We were all, 12.
Right.
And I remember specifically some Pizza Federation guys that came on, and we got into a fight with them, and it was a whole thing. And eventually, this is going to sound fucking wild, but in the early summer 2018, the entire RPF high command would vanish for days at a time.
Really?
No shit. I was a colonel. I was the highest troop rank in RPF, and I was the highest ranked person online.
On my end, I feel like the fact that was allowed to happen in RPF of all armies, because as far as I've been around, 2020. RPF has been what's the word?
Undisputed?
No, not even undisputed. I would say it's just this system. It's the
Yeah, they have a wild system of doing things. Everybody's always doing something. But
yeah.
It was wild. Sorry, I have a cold. But I mean,
I've heard.
The crazy fucking thing, we managed to hop in VC, and I kind of took charge of it. We managed to get 60 people online by just pinging online troops and telling people to get in voice chat. And it was wild because I had never, Dino and all of us, none of us had ever led an event in our lives, but working together and with me on VC, we fought with, a group of armies came on, the what would be the Red Dawn Alliance came on. You can read about this on the wiki. You had Uma, Hawks, Templars with El Mikey. So Zing and El Mikey were in command. Pizza Boys or Pizza Federation, and probably one or two other armies all hopped on with like 15, 20, maybe 30.
Mm-hmm.
And Zing and El Mikey obviously took like direct, obvious, like they took command. But it's Zing and El Mikey. They're fucking good at what they do.
Oh yeah, no, I've got, especially after Legends Cup, I've got a new respect for Zing.
But yeah, it was.
I had some thoughts on that.
It was insane.
We'll
it was fucking wild. Have you ever? What's the longest battle you've ever been in, like without break?
I think it was. I had 2 overtime rooms, so that would be 50 minutes.
We went for 12 hours straight.
That's pretty fucking crazy.
I want to do a post eventually, which is like the CPA Book of World Records, which just has a bunch of really fucking random world records, like a post, and that has to make that list. 12 hours straight, VC leading, having never led an event before, aged fucking 12. That shit was wild. That's the only reason
That's pretty fucking crazy.
The only reason. Oh, some people know me today is because like that's where I got my break. That's where I got the start in armies. And the fucking craziest thing, you're not gonna believe me, but again, this is on the wiki, and I fact checked it with Wiki Boy. He let me put it on there. But the same fucking thing happened the next day, the 2nd of July raid, and the exact same scenario played out. And both of those days, after 12-hour battles back to back, I beat Zing and El Mikey and all the guys. And then after, they all declared war on RPF, and then RPF fumbled the bag with World War VII, and they lost. But
I mean,
I consider myself a victor just because of that, because of like how absurd that is.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it was really insane.
But yeah, Templars has definitely come a
They've come a long way. I remember when Templars was like brand new, when they were bringing 15-20 to battle, when I met Zing in 2018. And now I watched them grow and balloon. I watched them grow and rise and then fall on CPO. I watched them try their hand in CPR, but get pushed out by RPF. And I've watched them ascend to the top, and for almost a year...
I missed that last part. I didn't get to see that. So that was pretty wild for me, because I was coming from 2020, and in 2020, I think I went to war with Templars once or twice, and we wiped the floor at the time. And then I got distracted with the whole SWAT thing, which I guess we could talk about later. But that happened. I retire, and then I come back in 2022, and I find out that the Templars are now the largest army in the community. They have been for weeks.
Yeah, that
was a lot to take in.
Yeah, I can only imagine that's what it would be like if you take some old veteran from, like, 2011. Like, take some old light troops officer from, like, 2011 who left armies in 2012, and then had to catch them up on the whole CPO water kit thing. Like,
oh my god.
Imagine that.
All right. When I found out that Water Kid was in charge of the largest private server.
Water Kid and Epic.
And then proceed to watch him get arrested. Oh my god!
Because you knew him back in armies, back in OG, back in the day.
Yeah, I knew him.
Like because I remember I heard stories about.
He was sort of he was on the other side of the fence. You know, we didn't really interact much, but the few times I did interact, it was like so seeing him get arrested. I was in VC with I think it was Callaway, Pookie, and MC, and I think someone else was there when we all found out, and we were just talking, and then news broke that CPO was getting shut down. And that alone was pretty wild. But then the next day, I think it was either the next day or the next few days, Waterkid actually gets just arrested outright, and the site goes dark. That was crazy. That was something else.
Yeah, because I think it was you who mentioned it recently, that, like, seeing the largest private server owned by Epic and Waterkid must have been fucking insane.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember, I think you mentioned that Epic won Noob of the Year in 2015. Like, brightest
I believe it was 2015. I actually went to check for the post because I wanted to be accurate on that, because I made mention of Noob of the Year at the very end of his little part. And what was it? I couldn't find the post. 2015 was gone, and I do remember him winning it, but he was also, how do I put this? He was by the time I was done with armies for the most part. I mean, I was still around, but by the time I was done, he was just getting into leading. So having seeing someone I knew who was just kind of like this guy that everyone
Who was like
made fun
Thunder?
of,
Who was
now,
like fucking? Who was like Thunder?
yeah, he was like Thunder or the Best or someone like that. And now this guy is like effectively, I mean, this is before I came back, before the big split, but for a while was like the head of armies. He was the most powerful person, undisputed. That was crazy.
You had a heart attack. I already know you had a heart attack.
Oh yeah, no, and I don't even need to get into Waterkid. If you were there before 2017, you know how jarring that must sound.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
I mean, I know he was always posting Nazi shit.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Isn't he black? I mean, isn't that wild? Like,
I mean,
I remember I saw a couple things.
Anyone can have any
Yeah,
opinion
but like,
they want.
I know he can. I know it's possible to have like you know your black skinheads, but like bro thinks he's Kanye West. It's fucking wild.
I mean, how do I put this? He's Waterkid has always been a very eccentric person. He's always been sort of out there. Obviously, what he would go on to do was mortifying, and I don't think we need to talk about it because I don't think it's.
But
entirely...
excluding CPO, I mean, he was just kind of a zany figure. Excluding CPO,
pretty much. I mean, he was a script kiddie, I believe. He was either associated with script kiddies or he was one himself. So, I mean, I suppose what happened next, besides the other stuff, again, not going to get into it. Besides the other stuff, I suppose CPO itself wasn't that surprising, including all the controversy that surrounded it. But yeah, it was wild to see that. Certainly.
I mean, I can only imagine because it's like imagine in like I can see it now. In like 8 years, there's gonna be a big private server boom, and it's gonna be like 2030, and then you're gonna be old man Lord Payne's still gonna be leading an army, and I'm gonna be like 15 years in CPA. And then I'm gonna vanish for a few years and come back and see Thunder and DeBest running like a military junta on a private server with 20 million people.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's. Listen, before 2020, I would say something like that would be absolutely insane. But now I don't know. Anything can happen.
I mean, honestly, yeah, I think the whole CPO issue. The fact we're still around after CPO, that alone proves that. I feel like Disney at one point is going to reopen something Club Penguin related just for, like, money.
I had read somewhere that I believe Rocket Snail, or R Snail, or whatever he goes by now, is was at least at one time looking into repurchasing the
I'll get a
IP
tattoo of Rocket Snail. I will if he does that. If he buys the rights to Club Penguin, I will get. If he remakes that shit, I will get a fucking tattoo of Rocket Snail. You can quote me on that.
Hey, listen, this is being recorded. Choose your words wisely.
No, I choose my words very wisely. You know how I am. I will get the word R Snail or Rocket Snail somewhere on my body, like at the bottom of my foot or some shit.
That's kind of a cop out.
Fine.
I would do it like across your back.
Yeah. That'd be fucking wild. Sorry, one second.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. What was it? You mentioned something about SWAT, right? About SWAT.
You want to talk SWAT?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk SWAT. Yeah, sorry. I'm just fucking. This thing's not fucking lighting.
So.
There we go. Continue.
Here's the thing with SWAT, and I suppose we start at the beginning. 2014, I was probably leading Water Vikings for a few months, less, like a month or at most. And I want to say that this is oddly enough, looking back at it, almost an exact repeat of 2020, which we'll get into in a minute. I want to say I was writing something regarding Bad Boy, who you may or may not remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't need to get into Bad Boy.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I was doing that, and I think I was like, "Oh, if you don't do so and so, we're going to declare war." And sure enough, we declared war. And that was the start of, at this point, what would now be an 8-year feud about. Because Water Vikings and SWAT would pretty much butt heads pretty consistently. And it culminated in a month-long war in 2020 where I did the exact same thing. I threatened Ganger, and he didn't back down, and then we went to war again. Except, unlike every other one, I would say that was one of the most decisive wars in
Water
at
Viking
least modern history. Oh yeah, no, it wasn't even close. And that's not anything against SWAT. It's just, what was the score again? I think it was like 28-3 or something.
Oh
28-6. Eager foray. War score was 18 to 1 tie to 6. So it was pretty I wouldn't even say it was contested. It was done before it even started. And I think a lot of that was just mismanagement on SWAT's side. And at the start, they did heavily rely on, I want to say, Ice Warriors, a little bit of RPF, and Dark Warriors.
Someone's got to bring Dark Warriors. Yeah. Continue.
I don't think Dark Warriors are ever going to come back, but
Dude,
I'll get to that in a minute.
Let me tell you. Prediction, by 2030, if armies survive, and I think there will be some sort of Club Penguin private server or army or revival, if armies make it to 2030, we're going to have at least one revival of Nachos, DCP, and DW.
I think DCP is not out of the question.
Well, Mustafa's still around. I mean...
Yeah. I think it's not even Mustafa. I think the later DCP people as well. It's not entirely out of the question. But Nachos, I think, is an interesting one. Because with the Nachos, I believe, I want to say it was Camper John or something like that. And he said, listen, if armies are alive and well in, I think, 2022, 2023, I will consider bringing Nachos back. And here we are. So now it's just a matter, it might have been 2024. Now it's just a matter of...
We just got to push it. We got to push it.
I mean, I'm not going to push it.
Yeah. I mean,
Nachos
on DCP... I mean, I know someone spoke to Musta, and there is actually 7 points that need to be done to revive DCP.
What would those be?
Number 1, rally support. Number 2, blame all wrongdoings on past gens on one DCP legend. Aaron Stone, Mustafa 10, Alfredo, and 32 Op are out for this. Number 3, contact WWE Best Fan and defeat him in sled racing, which could be done because from what I heard from, I think it was Brad, WWE may live within like fucking 15-minute drive of me.
I mean, listen, that's for you to deal. I'm not
get the backing of
betting
DC. I know. Would get the backing of at least 3 DCP legends. Bribery or threats preferred. Find allies for your return. You must openly oppose an army right away and plan to destroy them. And then to end it off, you need to beat Bam in a game of chess.
That last one might be hard. Bam is good.
Bam
is a weird character.
I love Bam. Bam is so. I helped get Bam unbanned from ACP a little last week.
Nice.
Because I got unbanned, and then I convinced Calgo, I was like, you gotta unban Bam. And then they started talking about it, and Bam got unbanned. I don't know.
So, what was I gonna say? Bam is certainly interesting because he's kind of an asshole, but he's a lovable asshole.
Exactly.
But he's also incredibly smart.
Mm-hmm.
Like, disturbingly so. And I don't know where he gets that shit from, but it's scary.
Yeah, it's scary.
Going back to SWAT, though, 2020 happens, and SWAT is pretty much down for the count until 2022. I come back. I sort of do whatever for a few months, and then I want to say, what was this? It was like August, September. It was August. And then war breaks out between SWAT and Water Vikings, Templars, Help Force, and Ice Warriors. And we pretty much all put aside any small differences. And this is what I'd say is the gateway to a Templars Water Viking alliance, which I think is entirely possible.
It should be
done. If not already in play.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any comments because I can't really break confidentiality, but I know some things. And all I'm saying... The dream trifecta would be ACP, TCP, and Water Vikings. The dream trifecta.
I'll speak. Zane and I have been borderline rivals since 2020. But that whole war against SWAT was definitely a cooling of tensions, and to a degree, I think, at least if I was still leading, I could totally count on TCP as an ally at this point. It's just a matter of getting it onto paper, because there is still some factors at play that I can't really get into. But for the most part, I would say unofficially we are officially allies.
Yeah, you guys have good relations. I mean, I don't know. Me personally, I've always loved the Water Vikings. My entire career, I've never had any problems with the Water Vikings, and I've had problems with most armies. I mean,
right.
I've had problems with Templars, with ACP, with RPF, with IW, with SWAT at one point, with LGA. I have problems with LGA, because Greeny's a fucking retard. But Water Vikings is one of the few armies that I haven't had any, like, problems with in a serious sense.
Right.
Like, yeah, the worst I ever had with Water Vikings is that one time I helped Jack not get banned when that whole coup went down or whatever.
Right.
But besides that, yeah. So moving on to... Actually, you have anything else you want to add on the kind of army side of it?
On the army side, I mean, I suppose the best thing I could say is I've had a complete career, even if it wasn't everything. Like, I've led I believe I've gotten first in the top 10 once. If not, I've definitely gotten second many, many, many times. I've gotten to a Legends Cup final. I was nominated for Legend in 2020. You know, I've sort of won it all without actually winning. So I would say I had a satisfying career at this point, and the cherry on top is I got to kick the shit out of SWAT one last time. So I would say I'm happy. You know? And I suppose that leads to the post, which I imagine is going to take up a bulk of this conversation.
This is prepared. Yeah.
And do you want to go section by section? Because I think that would be the best way.
Yeah, move it section by section. Let's break it down, actually. Could you send me the link to that, actually? I'll pull it up on camera here.
Oh, that's the
I was expecting it, but I am unequivocally nervous about it because how the fuck do you write 7,000 words? Like I understand that, like, for the past 3 months, basically every day I've written 1,000-word post, but how the fuck do you write like a 7,000-word post?
It was an act of passion.
Clearly,
you know. Let me find this. Here it is. Here you go. Let's go through this.
Oh God. Let me just bless myself before this.
You're gonna want to do that. We're gonna be here for a while. This is gonna be probably your longest podcast, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, you're good. I like the opening. PJayo's fucking pissed.
Thank you.
Okay.
I put a lot of effort into that, you know.
Let's start with the introduction, the prologue, notes, and thesis, and everything. Well, run me through.
Okay.
There's not really much for me to ask because it speaks for itself. Tell me about it.
Okay, so let's start with the first sentence. It was in the CPA chat, the organization. He had Dino had posted a link to this not even very old post by Blue Sakwa 1. It was titled, "Welcome to this year's political fad, absolute anarchy, and you can waste your time too." And I went through reading it, and I believe this was right before the semifinals when things got really, really hot. So I read through that post, and I was like, wow, this is really, really good. And then the semifinals happened, and obviously ACP had some issues with scheduling the battle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think no one really cares about that. And the big thing, the big elephant in the room is the disaster that was Templars versus RPF.
Yeah, that was a shit show. I had a whole post drafted up on it in case that shit got overturned. I'm glad I didn't have to post it.
I was commentating for CPA when that happened. I was with, I want to say it was I think it was Caitlin for the most time. I was supposed to have Callaway, but he got stuck on the side of the road, so that didn't happen. So that happened, and for those who may not be aware, even though I'm pretty sure everyone is, what ended up happening was the Templars had won. RPF contested it, which is, I think, perfectly fine. Frankly, if we're being completely honest, I do think the RPF should have won that. Right? I saw the whole thing.
On most parts, I think it was. Let me
explain it.
It was nice.
Let me explain it before we jump to conclusions here, because I want to explain my position on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Not the overturn, because the overturn is a whole different thing, which we'll get into in a minute. But I do believe, having seen the battle itself, RPF, despite its
I was there. I know.
Size, but I mean, listen, I gotta be, transparent on this. I think despite the size disadvantage, which was there at times, I mean, the last room it was genuinely neck and neck, which is why I think it was odd that the Templars had won that. But
I mean, RPF has the best trained troops ever. Like in CPA history, RPF has the best trained troops.
Oh yeah, that's my point though, because although Templars had a huge size advantage at the start, that definitely dwindled down, and more importantly, what you would see is RPF, despite that large size advantage, is they would be able to cover, and I believe personally they effectively covered for a good portion of the battle.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Even if they had gotten a bit repetitive with tactics which, to be fair, Templars had done the same too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I had to pick anything, I would have gone tie RPF, which is really why I was surprised that the Templars won that third room. Because
I think tie for room 1 and 2 are definitely. I agree with you on there. Tie.
I mean, I think I'm being sort of generous. I mean, it's been 2-3 weeks now, so I can't really name this off the top of my head. But I believe I also thought about RPF tie. I knew it was tight. It was a very tight battle, but I would have given the edge to RPF personally. So I understand why they contested it, right? But the problem really came in when you saw nearly a week-long wait for anything, and none of this was announced officially, and we were stuck.
Lack of transparency, that's the problem.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. Don't worry. That's deep in there. So that lack of transparency would lead to everything we know about it being let out through leaks. Zing had something leaked to him that suggested, and this is before this was even official, I will say, I had heard from someone else that it was going to be overturned. I will say that they were. It was like a daisy chain of who told me.
I heard it from an admin. I heard it from an admin.
I heard it. It was just some guy, right? It was just some dude. I'm going to try not to name names because obviously there are things at play here.
Exactly. I heard it from a CPA.
I will say
he told me.
I will say that through a series of events, it did reach us at Water Vikings.
I heard about it really, really soon after it was
Yeah, I heard about it the day of.
Apparently, they can't keep their fucking mouth shut.
Yeah, and I mean, there is definitely an issue with leaking, but I think to a degree for this, it was almost necessary. It was, eye-opening.
Of course. I mean, I think, arguably, when it comes to stuff like that, you shouldn't be leaking internal matters when it comes to, working and how everything works and function-wise, whether you're a team, because that breaks down trust. But when it comes to important announcements and important decisions, I've always been of the belief that anything and everything should be announced to the community so everybody's in the know, because you give more information, the more information you give, the more light you shed on anything behind the scenes that would be contentious, how much easier it gets to handle it and manage it.
That's the position I hold. I'm personally in favor of full transparency.
Yeah, same. I think
this thing was specifically what pissed me off. However, I did have issues going back to when the merger started, and
likewise.
We don't really need to get into it because there's not much to really get into. So, anyways, this came and went, and everything was through leaks, and then eventually, Zing had gotten word that it sounded like it was going to be thrown in RPF's favor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will say that that proof hasn't been shared explicitly. So, for all we know, he could have just gotten antsy and heard that it was in the process of overturning, and then made his post titled...
Robbery.
I gotta scroll down a little bit.
It's called robbery.
Robbery, right. The robbery post, which will probably go down because of what happens next. This post would have just been another Templars threatening to leave the league post if it wasn't for what happened next, because a day passes, and again through leaks, we eventually find out... Well, no, this part wasn't through leaks. But we do eventually find out it's not being overturned, and in fact, the Templars are holding steady, and they will be fighting that Saturday.
Well, like I said, I heard a bunch of things, but on that...
And this is I mean, I have to jump in here again, because this is the important part. Then RPF drops a post where...
I saw the post, yeah.
They allege that both CPA and CPAJ had, in the response to the robbery post, threatened to, in the response to the threat from the robbery post, would overturn their overturn. That's why it took an extra day. That's their allegation, at least. We haven't heard anything since. Yeah. So, and this was to ensure that the Templars didn't leave, right? So now there's the possibility that they had decided we don't want to lose the Templars, so we're gonna give it to them because it's less likely that RPF will leave.
Yeah,
and I suppose to an extent that's true, because they... Listen, I like Zing, but man, he can get heated sometimes. But that's pretty much the background for it, as to why I made it.
Yeah.
And going on, I had started it, I want to say, I had started it before the results of that had gotten announced, and I vowed to myself, regardless of what happens here, and regardless of what happens in Legends Cup that weekend, I will post this. And even if it may have looked like this is just me seething because we lost the battle, this was being written far before that. And this is something I had wanted to write for a while. In fact, I can go into the site here, and I believe I will have an old post titled "CPA is dying" that I never posted. We'll wait for that. So yeah, I eventually, and while this whole thing was happening, I was reading B1's post, the editorial I had mentioned earlier, and yeah, here it is: CPA is dying, the uncomfortable truth, 31st of May, 2022. And while that was happening, I kept rereading B1's post. I started to see similarities in how the administration was operating, you know? And that's not, again, I have to stress now that I like Max, I like Spotty, and I like Crazy. And Lucifer and I really don't get along, but at the same time, I don't hate him. Mm-hmm. So I sort of just typed away for the entirety of that first night, and then pretty much in and out throughout the second day. And then it was done, I want to say, Friday. So that was a 2-day affair, and I had written this whole thing. So that's where this came from, and I suppose that covers at least that part. So what do you want to cover next?
Well, before we jump into that one part, I do want to cover, really just take a quick step into, leaking and everything here and people from Amazon. When I heard about the overturning, again, I'm not going to name him, but I heard it from an admin in CPA org. I heard it from there. But then, pardon me, I heard from someone else that one of the admins, or they were talking about having a 3-way battle where Templars and RPF and Water Vikings would have competed, but that sounds fucking stupid for a final.
Yeah, listen, I was in probably the biggest 3-way battle of all time, that being RPF versus DCP versus Nacho's 2013 Legends Cup final. And that was a nightmare, and it didn't work. So I do actually have to commend them for not going for that option.
That cop
nothing
out,
else. Yeah, I think it would have been disastrous had they done that, because then no one would have been satisfied. And then, frankly, as far as I know, having spoken with Aaron, because we did consider that as a possibility, the chances are we would have probably threatened to leave as well had we gone that way.
Yeah.
Obviously, that moment is past,
Thank
and
God.
Aaron is also retired. God bless him.
I miss Aaron already. I know he's still around, but fuck, I miss him. I miss him.
I still talk to him like
No, I
every
spoke to him
few
yesterday.
hours.
Yeah,
It's fine.
I talked to him. I talked to him actively. It's just I miss having him in the ranks. Like I remember when he retired. Dude, that post hurt me because I remember meeting Aaron when I was like 12 or 13. Fuck, I miss his ass.
I got a story to tell that Mustafa will certainly remember, and Aaron has said that he will remember.
Yeah.
And that was my first interaction with Aaron, the legend Aaron Stone. When I was, oh God, this was 2013, so I had to be 11. When I was 11, I was not showing up for a DCP event. So I said some shit like, yeah, my dog is getting attacked by wolves. And that turned into this whole thing. And then eventually Mustafa released the post, and then it sort of spiraled into the dog being attacked by hyenas, and I chipped one of their heads off with a shovel. You could probably still find it on the DCP site. I would say don't look, because there is a comment that was edited of mine that's like, Mustafa kind of sort of doxing me, but also not really, because, I mean, everyone kind of knows the general location where I am, and it's also the wrong city.
That's funny as fuck.
But
That's
but I mean,
hilarious.
morally speaking, don't do that ever. Don't
Of course.
do IPs. But
that's funny.
But
as fuck.
looking back, it was pretty funny, and that was my first experience with Aaron, because I believe he was LIT or something at the time. And eventually I would get thrown out of DCP, and that would turn into a whole other rivalry, which at one point I would almost suggest put Mustafa and I on, and then we could talk about that.
That could definitely be another episode.
That's a saga that I can't get into alone. But going beyond that, yeah, Aaron was certainly a key part of the Water Vikings, but we're getting a little off track here, and we have a lot to cover. So. It was certainly a mess, and I think those semifinals certainly played a large role in the distrust that everyone started to feel since.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, Calgo could go on and on about his situation, although I no offense to Calgo, I do kind of sort of think the post you made was, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think you did the right thing, sort of clearing that up. But it's like the scale of it. I don't know. Anyway, because I'm getting really, really off topic. So yeah, the whole thing happens, and obviously we talked about the leaks. So I guess that leads us into the CPO stuff. If you want to start with that.
Sure, move over to the next section. Uncertainty and Club Penguin Online. This can only be fun. There's nothing negative that can come of this.
So, I figured, because again, I had been reading B1's post quite a lot. I figured the best place to start would be, let's do the history of this whole thing. I picked up from where he left off, and where he left off was the end of Zaxter's reign. And I believe he made that post while Mock was CEO. And you would see a series of CEOs that didn't really work out. There was Mock, Gob, Atticus, Zinking, Sammy, and then Funks had to jump in as interim. And by the time Funks jumped in, it wouldn't matter because Club Penguin itself would close a few months later. So that happened. And I mean, we could really skim over this part mostly. It's just sort of an overview of the history up until we get to Epic's part, which I think I would genuinely like to talk about a little bit more. But for the uncertainty in the CPO part,
yeah,
it's mostly just history. Although I do think that if you do go through and read this, I would highly recommend you read that part because it is a major component in how we got here. Even if I do skim over some of the parts, like the minor leagues from CPR, that would all pretty much combust. But CPOAL, keep in mind also, I wasn't around for this part, so I would have, this is all secondhand. So if I made a mistake, I'm sorry. I definitely did. um, but yeah, I sort of kind of go into Water Kid a little bit there. I go into CPOAL, and I go into the initial reason for that being Legends Cup, but then I briefly touch on this, that being the allegations. This is where I would say this is where the deck of cards, from my understanding, started to come undone for CPO, because this is when the allegations against Waterkid came out initially, and RPF did not like it, and eventually that would lead to them getting thrown out of CPO and CPOAL. And that was, I would say, an incredibly important piece to what happens next, because if RPF doesn't get thrown out of there, then you just wouldn't see CPAM and everything that
Yeah,
comes
I remember
after
when RPF got thrown out because I got banned because of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and like I mentioned in the post, I believe personally that it was a gateway that allowed Epic to do what he did in regards to CPOAL going into the future, which we'll get into in the next section. But yeah, this part is mostly just history. There's not much really to say here.
So see what's next here. Epic 101, Rejuvenation, and Authority. Now this one should be especially interesting given Epic is an advisor here, even though I should clarify, in this org, the advisors simply give advice. I've seen some people get misconstrued about who's in charge. The advisors give advice, that's it.
Even earlier in the post, I'll be genuinely honest. When I told you, that's just perception, I genuinely thought Lord Payne was in charge of it. Because that's just how people see this sort of thing. And, I mean, we can get into that after we discuss the post.
Yeah, this is my shit, for the record. And yeah, continue.
Gotta cover your bases. So this section, I had multiple people come up to me after doing this and said they really enjoyed this part, including Epic himself.
I love reading this post when I read it the first time. It was, entertaining.
So the Epic part is incredibly, incredibly important, I think, because, and listen, Epic and I haven't really spoken much, right? We spoke briefly today for the first time in 2 years, and he had mentioned a few days ago that he was like, hey, I wish PJ was in the server, and that I could tell him, this was a really well-made post. I had spoken to him way back when CPO was sort of collapsing in regards to potentially moving Shadow Troops over there, which we can get into later, the whole collapse bit, because that does come up. For the Epic part, I would say despite everything, that being, he was effectively, he very nearly won Noob of the Year. He got an honorable mention at the end of the whole thing in 2017. Mm-hmm. And I had gotten, I think, 4th place in 2013. Again, that goes back to the dog story, which we, again, if I ever come back on the podcast, that we could talk about that more. Mm-hmm. So that's where you would see Epic come up, and he was really not highly regarded at all going into 2017. He had led light troops for a bit, and that was effectively considered a bust until Waterkid came back. And then, of course, there's the controversy regarding 2016 light troops, where you hear allegations still to this day that most of it was botted or multi-logged, which, I mean, by 2016, there was a lot of that, but especially with light troops, you saw it. And yeah, he just wasn't really well considered, but then you fast forward 2018, and he picks up CPOAL, and admittedly, I think a lot of his success, and not to totally discredit him, but I think a lot of his success was due to the environment that he was provided with, that being CPO, which really allowed him to clamp down and sort of centralize the whole thing. And I'll get into that more when we talk about leagues that would follow, because I do have an interesting take that I don't think I really covered that much in regard to this post. But yeah, Epic is a very, very interesting person in the history of CPA. In a sense, he went from one of the least respected people to the community to either you respected him or you just would get turned to ash,
Yeah.
He was, and from what I hear and from what I've spoken to him about a little bit since, he's definitely calmed down since, but 2018, 2019, 2020, he was the closest thing we had to a real locked down dictatorship type.
Yeah.
For me, the league was serious, and I know for a fact that leaders there was cases where leaders wouldn't own their own servers or sites, and you would see situations of where if they attempted to leave the league, the chat would get nuked or the site would get nuked or something along those lines. I remember that vividly. I believe with DCP. DCP
I
got it pretty
also remember
bad.
that. Yeah, I remember that happening to armies back then. Which, yeah,
I mean, again, I can't really speak to what Epic does now because I haven't spoken to him in so long. But it was certainly a thing. Um, so yeah, seeing him go from what was effectively Light Troop's version of Rocky, if anyone remembers Rocky,
yep,
to this is pretty crazy. Um, and he is certainly one of the most pivotal figures in armies. Nothing really comes close to him in
yeah,
regards to the influence that he would play 2017 onwards. I mean, listen. I think there's more pivotal figures. Boomer 20 comes to mind. Blue 1, even Blue 2, King Funks to a degree. But I would say that going 2017 onward, it's hard to find anyone more influential than Epic.
he is. Yeah,
And
CPBS era wise, he's up there.
no, he's not even up there. I would say he's the top of it. And
Yeah,
importantly, I would say because he had the ability to effectively lock down, and this is something I covered very, very little, I believe. Um, it sort of was the first real successful league because it was his way or you just couldn't operate on CPO. And it really did work at the time. It was certainly a self-sufficient system, and regardless of what you think of the coin events, which I think lowly of them personally, you can't say it wasn't successful.
yeah, I agree.
Armies did genuinely benefit from that, even if it is effectively the same thing as recruiting from Roblox, which we can get into later as well. Um, but yeah, nothing really came close to the success. No one really came close to the success that he had in that regard. And I think, although it's odd to have someone, just one person, in a post like this, be so consistently name dropped, I think if there's anyone who's earned that, it's probably Epic. And I mean, listen, I go on later about characters like MC and Callaway, where they played a huge part in founding CPAM, which would eventually become the dominant partner as the leagues merged.
Yeah,
But regardless of that, overall, I would say Epic had more influence because he would really popularize the idea and potentially falsely prove that leagues could be a success. Um, and I think, regardless of what you think of him, we're either still embedded in that idea or suffering from that idea, however you want to word it, of leagues being the dominant choice, you know? And I personally disagree with that, but again, we'll cover that later. That pretty much covers the Epic
yeah,
section.
covers up the whole epic section. Let's see. Pardon me. Club Penguin rewritten: The Struggle Against Armies. I remember this when CPR was cracking down on armies, and armies were not allowed in CPR for the most part.
Yeah.
So take it away.
So CPR, for the most part, was sort of in the background in regards to armies because CPO was obviously not only helping them but just straight feeding them. It was an incredibly beneficial system for armies, and I understand why armies stayed there. Um, but eventually, when the allegations against Waterkid come out, that's when you see armies sort of jump over to CPR, namely RPF. RPF was the big one. Eventually, ACP, held force.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with that, and I think this is a very important piece, is CPR did not help armies. In fact, they actively tried to kill them off.
Exactly. That's always a problem I had.
Stu, some people may recognize that name. Stu was CPR admin. And with Stu, unlike Waterkid, who had an army background, Stu was very much against armies because he saw them as potentially malicious. And you know what? To a degree, I have to agree because there has been multiple instances of armies being malicious. um, against users of all kinds, not even just leaders, but also like bottom of the barrel troops who really don't need to get involved in any of that stuff. Um, but he was actively malicious against armies, and he did try to sincerely clamp down. And eventually, I believe this was 2022 or 2021 or something, we had reached an agreement where armies couldn't go on anything besides anything above 3 bars.
Yeah, I remember
If
that.
if your
The
army
three
was
bar
on
rule.
a
That was the biggest
server,
bullshit ever. Fuck that shit.
yeah, no, I mean that I would say the CPR did a lot of damage to armies, whereas I think CPO.
CPO
I mean,
encouraged it.
CPO encouraged it, but I want to reword that because CPO encouraged it, but I also think at the same time CPO would do more damage than CPR, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But with CPR, from the outset, it was certainly uneasy, which is weird because unlike CPO, CPR for a bit had a very natural army scene that was sort of developing, and I want to write about this at one point. Um, where because I was doing research on this, and I had remembered the tubas and RPF thing.
That was my first war. Damn, that takes me back.
Yeah, and you got to remember the tubas were just a clan that showed up.
They were just random rogues. It was like weird because they had a couple key figures, but they were always the decentralized rogue army, and that would lead to RPF. The last time patrols were largely used in CPA was that war. I remember so many hours getting sent out to patrol looking for random groups of yellow penguins. I felt like I was fucking racially profiling them because they used to just have us like attack anyone who was yellow in the game. It was fucking wild. Like the tubas, man, that was a fun war. That was fun.
Listen, different time.
Yeah.
But the thing with the tubas is, and you also see this with the chefs, which would eventually become the Pizza Boys, then Pizza Federation, and
Evolution.
With the SARS. To a degree, and this is just a theory, and this is also something that would have never happened. Let's say armies never go to CPR, and let's just say armies completely died at 2017. I think you would see a new community sort of rise up around the tubas, around the chefs.
Like yeah.
It was. I think armies are almost naturally occurring in this sort of thing.
In CPA, and okay, I've my opinion on that. You got CPA, you have games like Roblox and Minecraft, games where they give you that liberty and there's only so much to do. It's only natural for people to
sort of do something like
that. Yeah, like, okay, we're here, we're just sitting here, why don't we have some fucking fun with it? And why don't we, like...
make it, like, almost competitive. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Thing, right?
It makes it competitive. I fuck with that shit. It's fun.
Here's something you might not think about a lot, is our armies are... They weren't always here, you know?
There was a time
It was
before,
2005, we had the sports event, the sports party, or whatever it was.
And that's what started it off, but still it was like...
Yeah, then you got the Color Wars, and that went into World War One with the clans. And that's pretty much where I would say things diverged, because unlike with the clan wars of World War One, where you saw the very vague notions of ACP and Romans and nachos, and I believe towards the end UMA-esque figures, the Mafia or whatever.
Yeah.
Pink Mafia's Army or whatever.
You can see the cultural evolution.
Yeah,
it's amazing to watch. I love it.
But
it's
then,
like, yeah, you remember Spore? You remember that game, Spore?
Spore, yeah.
It's like that. Spore. It's just like that.
Yeah, but like you see that, but then you go over to the Tubas thing, and unlike with the clans where no one intervened, RPF was there, and I don't want to say it killed that potentially growing community, but I will say that it sort of merged it into ours, because then out of that, I mean, obviously the only thing that really stuck around for any real amount of time was the Pizza Federation, but you would see these clans turn into armies, and I think that would have happened naturally had we not gotten involved anyway. But it would have been a separate community that maybe we just wouldn't interact until let's assume the things with Waterkid didn't happen. We would all probably still be on CPO right now, because again we'll get into that. And at that point, you would see, let's say CPO still does shut down at some point, right? Let's say the crackdowns happen regardless, and we all end up on CPR. Then you would see the two communities collide, because an important thing to note with the CPO armies is a lot of it was revival projects, right? There were naturally occurring armies in there that would come out. I mean, the Aliens, Help Force, Templars come to mind. But the thing is, most of the other success stories from CPO, pirates, light troops, that sort of thing, they were all revivals. They were old veterans coming together and saying, you know what, let's do it because if we have the backing, we could totally get like 100. And a lot of armies did. Redemption Force, SWAT, pirates, light troops, ice warriors, dark warriors, DCP, etc., 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 etc.
Yeah.
It was sort of self-servicing. So, to a degree, I don't think if the things with Waterkid didn't happen, I don't think we would be on CPR, and it would certainly be a very, very different scenario at that point. But I'm getting a little off topic here because this is all about.
I feel like just to add off on what you were saying about armies kind of naturally developing. I do wonder if like browser client versus downloadable client does have an effect on that, because I feel like we might see the natural development of certain armies on say new CP or CPF, for example.
Oh, for sure. I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah,
On
you're
new
right.
CP, the only old style army from our era and our type of army development is LGA, but then again, they're a fucking meme army now, so it's like
LGA is certainly something.
LGA is a meme army.
We could talk about LGA in a bit.
Yeah, later. Let's move to the next part.
For the most part, our community is staying on battlegrounds. Or
yeah, I think we should be able
I
to.
know for a while there
but,
was armies operating. I want to say it was RPF on Legacy.
RPF operated on Legacy, but it turned out the owner of Legacy is a pedophile. And all that.
I was about to get to that. You got
back on CPA. I had a whole post drafted on that and the association there and how they only left CPL when TCP called them out on it in the Summer War.
Yeah,
which is a big problem for me, but like I don't know.
That's. I mean, listen. To an extent, I kind of understand why they did that because there really is
a lot of recruits. Yeah,
there's no replacement for CPR at the moment.
Yeah, it makes sense.
CPL, and this is certainly going to get me into some shit. I had personally used it not too long ago, and then I was talking to Dino. It's like, so what's the catch here? And then I got reminded of the whole thing with ski. But from a purely
numerical perspective, outside of that, I see no issues with it. It's the best we can.
Yeah, it's literally just the owner. Because right now, other than that, it is literally the best option.
Yeah, but then again, Waterkid is just the owner. But still.
Given what happened with Waterkid, a lot of people, myself included, are uncomfortable with the idea of moving the community over there. So let's say this ski figure leaves eventually, and the new guy is clean as a whistle. I see no reason not to.
Yeah, I still think we should be recruiting off of there to some extent. Like CPF, CPL, and new CP, we should be recruiting there.
Yeah, but
it's a fresh database of people who play the game who aren't being influenced by anybody but Greeny a little bit.
But the problem is, it will come down to downloadable clients, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. That, so that's why you don't see it.
I don't really care personally,
going back to what you were saying. The idea that there is potentially a burgeoning community there. Again, I wouldn't know because I haven't even used any of these downloadable clients.
There are. There's like thousands of people in new CP. Thousands. I play it.
Yeah, there's thousands, but the question is, will armies eventually spawn there? I don't know.
I want to find out.
Given what I saw with CPR, I would say it's possible.
I want to honestly. I might run some experiments, or I might just kind of investigate and work around and see if we can find out. I want to find out. I want to see if that's like possible.
I want to see it, but at the same time, I don't want to mess with it personally.
Yeah, I want to be like. I just want to watch.
I want to see what happens.
I want to watch, and I want to just see what'll happen with it. I just lurk the active servers and try and just find out whether it's like if there is potential, and if there is potential, how can we tie them into our community, or should we even tie them into our community, or should we just let them develop?
Right.
It's like that one uncontacted tribe off the coast of India. You know what I'm talking about? On Sentinel?
North Sentinel.
Yeah, North Sentinel. Yeah, it's like those guys. It's like, do we let them develop, or do we see what the fuck happens if we don't?
Well, I mean, the problem is the people who have seen what happened were shot with arrows. So it's like...
That's true. They may not be the biggest fans of us.
I mean, listen, that's the thing. God forbid there is a multi-platform war breaking out.
That would be fucking fun. I don't care what anyone says.
Fun.
That would be fun.
It would be fun, but I think the problem is then we risk completely wiping them out. But I completely digress. We're way
off topic. We're off topic. Next subject.
Back to the struggle against armies.
Yeah,
I briefly covered this, but CPAM was the organization that I first got involved
I
with
remember
since
CPAN. Yeah,
CPAC. I did a few posts for CPAC back in the day, and they were dog shit. But CPAM was the first place I personally got involved in. So after this point, I stopped getting secondhand information, and it was just off of what I knew, which was really nice because 3 sections of no idea what's going on was very hard to get around. Um, but yeah, the CPAM I think is the closest we've gotten to CPAC besides the hub,
yeah.
which we'll get
Rest their
into.
soul. CPAM and CPA were fucking good. The best media in the
Yeah,
era so far.
easily. Um, fucking dogs.
Yep,
Let them wear out. Come on.
you're good.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah. Do you want to move on to the next header, or are we still talking
Not
about?
quite. I'm
No.
I'm still I'm still on this.
All right, continue.
Jesus fuck. Oh my god. So the thing with um CPAM and CPOT, they were the closest we've gotten since, because it was the first time in 3-4 years where there wasn't a disputed head of the community. It was very a clearly drawn line,
Yeah, I
and
remember
things
that.
happened with
Yeah.
CPA, and it just went down the way it did. CPAM, I think, was mainly successful though because of just the collapse of CPO, which we'll get into in the next section here. Um, but yeah, I mean that's really all I have to say on that. A lot of it is just, again, it's more history. The epic part was sort of a side tangent because I did think it was worth it, but I wouldn't be able to fit that into like a post. Um, but yeah, the epic part I think needed to be done. But everything else, pretty much history up until this next part, which is World War rewritten, the collapse of CPO and COVID-19, and the consequences that followed.
Yeah. This is
Um,
the divergence point for like older CPPS era and newer CPPS era.
yeah. I mean, let's start with you because I don't want to ramble on. What do you have to say on this so far?
Well,
Like
I
this
remember
section.
World War Rewritten. I think that was like the ultimate blue ball of a war. But the collapse of CPO then directly after leading into the COVID shit. I mean, it had a lot of consequences because it left a vacuum and a lot of chaos, but it also helped bring back that second little rise in armies post 2018 ish, right? Because we were on a downward
Right.
trend for a while.
Right.
That's
So
Take it away.
let me throw a snowball here because I figure we're gonna come back to this shot in a minute.
Yeah.
So the World War Rewritten. This is the first war that I came back to, and this is when I found out about the situation between. Oh my! I'm gonna fucking kill these dogs. um, this is where I found out the situation between RPF and ACP, which I didn't know existed at the time. I thought it was just everyone was best friends in the whole wide world, and then I found out they actually hated each other. Um, so that comes into play, and this was supposed to be the big blow off, and this was supposed to be everything finally comes to a head. And at this point, it's important to note that the idea that CPO was going to fail was not secured. But I want to say at this point, this is when, what was his name? Was it Dom? Was that the guy?
I think.
That's when those videos started to come out.
Yeah, maybe.
So this
Dom,
is
I
all
think,
around
yeah.
the same
Maybe
time.
I'm wrong, but I think so. Yeah.
This is all around the same time. World War Rewritten happens, and if you're coming from the CPO side of things, or if you're newer, this is going to sound incredibly dumb because it was a 5-day war, eight or something battles,
I
every
remember
single
that
one of them
shit, yep.
contested. We didn't have judging at the time, and we didn't have a league or nothing, which I think is fine. But the judging part, in hindsight, would have definitely cleaned this up a lot. And this is where this all started on the CPR side of things, because it had been experimented before. Uh, DMTs, Dr. Mind Turtles, CPA League, and that had done it before, but otherwise it was mostly media based. So that was the first place that really happened here, but it didn't really work out. But following World War Rewritten, people looked over at the CPO and the CPOAL, the league, was seeing success, and I think the problem is they assumed that success was entirely from the structure of it, which, looking back, I think is the exact opposite. I think
Yeah, it was only really successful because of the Force, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what my opinion comes down to. I think if the league had been attempted on CPR, it would have failed. But given who was involved, given the inherent ties, it worked out. Um, so people would decide that going forward we need a league. I had voted against this. At this point, I was back and I had just reformed the Shadow Troops, which I mean I can get into that, but there's nothing really interesting happened there. It was Shadow Troops, and that merged with Warlords of Chaos or Cosmos. It was Warlords of Cosmos, superheroes army,
Yeah.
and that formed the Golden Guardians. And then we eventually decided, you know what? Why don't we just revive it? Because now the Golden Guardians was originally supposed to be the Water Vikings, but we couldn't really get the perms for it at the time. And we in hindsight we could have just done it, right? And I could talk about Water Viking permissions because I'm sure you saw me go off on the best a few days ago.
I've seen you do it multiple times. I love the kid. I love the guy. The best is always funny.
But like, listen,
he needs time to learn. He needs time.
Let's talk about. Let's pause for a minute and talk about the legitimacy of the Water Vikings, because
I don't know why you used to bring that up. I mentioned it once or twice as a meme when I was talking with Aaron, but like,
here's the thing: it is the most legitimate the Water Vikings could possibly be. Let's look at who formed it. All right, let's talk about who formed it. Let's go. I'm gonna go to the Golden Guardian site. Going into it, the Golden Guardians were made of myself, Buddy, Adden, Timat, Thomas, and Superhero. Out of those, Buddy, Adden, and myself were all Water Viking legends. We had all gotten no, Buddy, Adden wasn't, and I had mine removed, which is also another funny story. But I would just get it reinstated by the time shit turned around. But the fact is, Buddy was there, and we had Funks. Funks was originally supposed to be a part of the Golden Guardians, but he wanted to come back to the Water Vikings. So that was sort of the final push. We was like, you know what, let's just get Funks involved. Mm-hmm. But Funks had Legend, and that was confirmed. We couldn't get in contact with Bet Boy, but we had gotten in contact with Zaxter, who had created the army alongside Jedpen. And Jedpen, at the time, pretty much said, I don't really care. Do whatever you want. And Zach said, sure, go for it. So we'd gotten permission from the creators. And then going forward, we had legends involved. Eventually, I would get my legend back. So that's myself. Then there's Buddy. And then there's Adden, who would get it. And he probably should have gotten it in 2015 because he led that final against the RPF in Legends Cup. I believe Timat and Tylund both had greatest troop of some kind, maybe greatest leader. So Abe is, given the age of the army, given the people who were involved and how disconnected they were from the community, this is as close as you'll ever get to a legitimate version of the Water Vikings. And the fact that there's like maybe 5 people out there who refuse to acknowledge that, they are some of the dumbest motherfuckers I have ever met.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I'm getting off topic. Golden Guardians, Water Vikings. That's your timeline. Shadow Troops and Worlds of Cosmos created the Golden Guardians, and then eventually we got permission from Zaxter, Jed, and we got Funks on board, and we turned into the Water Vikings. So it's all sort of the same army, effectively, because the Vet Corps was still there from Shadow Troops. So World War Rewritten happens. And as that happens, the community, at least the CPR side of it, is in total chaos because we just had a complete buster of a war. Nothing happened. The only thing that came out of it was the change in direction. And here's an important part about CPAM. CPAM was very much a bottom-up organization where the armies would have control over the media, which was fine for a while. But then when we get the league involved, this is where you start to see army boards. And if you read B1's post, that's when you start to see the he's complaining about the councils, which were a thing in 2009, 2010, 2011, which completely failed. It was the idea that armies would sort of unite and create laws, and it didn't work out. And that's effectively what the leagues are too, just under a different name. Specifically with the army boards. So the army board, the first seed of that from the CPAN and that sort is from here, right? That happens here because everyone was just pissed off and they wanted a league, but at the same time, CPAM didn't want to compromise on their morals, so they sort of gave the armies a huge amount of representation, which, given what we know now, was the consequences of World War rewritten. We still feel it every single day in this community. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Dom was putting out those posts, those videos, and eventually that made its way up to, I forgot his name. What's the a big YouTuber? A big YouTuber got his hands on it. I don't remember his name. Some ordinary gamer. He got his hands on it, and he ran with that story, and eventually got to the BBC. And now we're talking about a national expose of the CPO. And of course, at that point, what do? You know, Disney, regardless if they wanted to ignore it before, and regardless of how they really felt, which obviously I think they were just waiting for an opportunity, caught on to the whole thing, shut down CPO, shut down like half of the private servers, and then you saw the CPOAL, which had been mostly successful up to this point, besides some things behind the scenes because the videos were coming out and people started to get uneasy again, and they tried jumping ship again. Doritos tried, Aliens tried, and Templars tried. Those are the big three, which left you with the Pirate LTE group and the Warrior Alliance, which we'll get into because that comes into play later. So now CPAL, which had dropped the online because CPO is dead and Waterkid is in prison at this point. Not prison, he got arrested. I don't think he actually got charged with anything. I don't think
I'm pretty sure he walked. He walked on almost everything, yeah.
Yeah. But the point is, this whole thing happens, and out of nowhere, CPAM, which had been relatively small compared to CPO, because the CPO armies were massive. You know, they were maxing like 100 each. No one in CPAM was doing that besides RPF. ACP was doing like 70, 80. Health Force was doing like 50, and then everything else was in the 20s. Golden Guardians at this point, I think maybe did 25, 30. Really good time for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then the leagues had to merge, and suddenly CPAM was the dominant force, which means it would be very bottom up. And then you saw the hub, and this is the most legitimate any organization has been since CPAC. The hub was borderline perfect in terms of news, in terms of staff. The problem came about with the league. And he is going to disagree with me on the whole staff thing, and I'm sure I'll get DMs for that later. I eat him. But yeah, you would see inevitably a super alliance form because, you know, if it's very army centric and there's a league and a map, which is the map. Oh my god, I hate the map. Can we talk about the map for a minute, actually, before I continue?
Fuck the map.
Talk about the map? Taking that as a talk about the map.
Sorry, I said fuck the map, yeah.
Okay. I just saw a very, very, very funny picture. So I just saw a different picture that's not funny, but I'm very much enjoying that picture. So the map. the thing with the map is it is an awesome concept. I mean, listen, back since 2008, when Nations started to form with RPF and Nachos and UMA and ACP, and they split up the server lists, that's technically a map. But the problem is, the thing is, anyone could contest that, and eventually you saw Order 67 or whatever it was, where they tried to put down every single small army. The map doesn't really work when it's truly enforced, because then those small armies, which thrive off of taking the scraps and hanging in there, it doesn't. They can't survive. So what ended up happening is, and I'm taking them. This is a first-hand account because I had to play this fucking dog shit game of chess when the BIA formed. And again, I hate fucking shitting on the BIA because I feel like it's overdone and they're sort of an irrelevant alliance at this point. It's not even really the BIA anymore. Dark Warriors have been dead for like 2 years.
Dark Warriors is dead. It's RPF and IW is more focused on Water Vikings.
Yeah. So that whole alliance is effectively a non-issue. But at the time, I wouldn't even say they controlled the league, but they knew how to play the league. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just they did what they could to stay on top. So, and this is where I really disagree with Zig, because I know his whole bit on the podcast was fuck BIA. I don't really give a shit. But
yeah.
Effectively speaking, the BIA were able to use smaller armies they were associated with, Water Ninjas, SWAT, which is where that war came from. Water Ninjas, SWAT, the Golden Troops, Mangoes. They would use those smaller armies to completely control the league and therefore the map. And while it was successful for them, I do believe the community would eventually suffer for it. And, we can go on and on about that, but who really cares? The point is, it showed a huge flaw in the map that eventually got fixed, but the problem is that fix killed small armies entirely. So now there's nothing. Now we don't have small armies. Now we have, at best, LGA mercenaries and like an alternating group of Red Ravengers, Dark Vikings, and whatever army will come up for like a month, and Cherries, for example, and then disappear.
Yeah.
And even the legitimacy of those is questioned at best because shenanigans with RFCP, whatever. So that whole thing is an issue. Now we don't have small armies, and now we have like 6 armies total. We screwed the pooch here. It's I don't know how
we've been screwing the pooch since like 2021.
Yeah, but
L after L.
It hasn't been a fun time to be watching armies, to say the least.
Yeah.
And the problems with the map really are the biggest consequence, right? The community would sort of devolve, and because of generally toxic situation between the CPO armies and the CPR armies, notoriously you would see ACP and DCP sort of try to step back repeatedly against the CPO armies and RPF, who would, I would say, correctly sided with the CPO armies. And eventually, War Vikings got wiped out, DCP got wiped out, and ACP got put down. And that was pretty much the end of that rivalry as far as I'm concerned. There was a few wars afterwards, but at that point, that was it. RPF had come out on top, and RPF with BIA, they were effectively untouchable through 2020 because you couldn't touch them. They not only was RPF maxing 100, Ice Warriors was also maxing 100, and Dark Warriors could max 50. Then the Dark Warriors shut down, and that was the first real blow. I forgot what that was for, though. I think I can't remember either. They choked in some tournament.
Probably March Madness or Champions Cup.
I think it was Christmas Chaos, actually.
Really?
The point is, Dark Warriors died, and then I think Freezy sold the server or something, and it was it. I think he got like $120 off that.
Is it worth the Freezy? Sell out.
Yeah, actually, I would say shit.
Sell out.
No offense to Water Vikings. If I still had that server and someone offered me $200, I'm sorry. That's it.
Fair enough, but still, sell out.
And he's a sellout. I get it. I would be a sellout too, though.
I might. It depends. It depends.
This is.
I mean, I know this server. If someone offered me like $200 for this server, I'd fucking take that bag, no question.
Well, yeah, but like point is, what was done was done. BIA is dead, and I think the idea that they are this big looming threat is completely fucking brain dead, because they just aren't that threat anymore. RPF is still a sizable army.
RPF maxed like 14 yesterday, and Ice Warriors is like struggling to pass 15.
Yeah, like, listen, but all right. Well, let's talk about sizes for a second too.
Size matters, but that's not the only thing that matters.
No. That's not where I'm going with this. Size matters, sure, but at the same time, it's about the scale of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, despite the way things look, armies are relatively normal right now in terms of sizes. There's less armies, and there's strife in the community, but size-wise, this is about where you would see armies sit for most of the community's history. 15. You would see on the lower end like 10, and then at the top end you would see 20, 25, 30. Templars being the exception, being the one that can really max 50 right now. But otherwise, the community is pretty much. It's definitely still in a slump period. There's less armies, and I think it's a little bit of below average in terms of size. I'd have to actually map that.
Can you keep talking for like 5 minutes? I'm gonna go help my mom bring in some groceries while we're at it.
You go do that.
No, you're good though. Keep talking. Keep explaining this. This is good shit.
Okay. All right. So the thing is, these sizes I think are perfectly normal. I don't see any reason they wouldn't be normal. This is about where most of armies would sit. That's pretty much the end of that. Now the problem is I have run out of things to say here because I was kind of hoping he'd push the conversation along, but we've been kind of treading the water for a little bit, and I have now got 5 minutes to kill. So if anyone's listening to this, hi, what's going on? What a podcast, right? Yeah, this is definitely as long as the episode. We're going into hour 2 now. And we haven't even covered the important parts of the post. And then there's all sorts of shit I need to talk about afterwards, too. I hear my cat. I don't know if you could hear that. I hope the dog wasn't too loud earlier, too. It was definitely on there. Yeah, I suppose while I'm here, I might as well talk about the CPAC. I think it's cool that there is an option, although I do have some qualms about this place. I do think, for the most part, it's pretty cool, and I hope that it can succeed to some degree, and I hope that CPA can also succeed, but we'll get to why that might not be the case in a little bit. And I am very quickly running out of things to say, so I'm going to hope that at one point he will edit this whole section out, because I'm just at this point buying time.
You're buying time. Perfect. Let's get to the next section.
Okay.
We're good.
Holy shit. All right.
Where we are today.
Do you have an editing program that can
I do not. That was like a minute. We're good.
Okay. I'll send you a link.
Apologies. That never happens. I don't want to leave my mom to do the Costco groceries alone.
I get it.
We're good.
So,
where we are today, organizational blackmail, council culture, and a lack of interest. Tell me about this.
Right. Okay. So now we're at where we are today. This goes into the issues with the Legends Cup explicitly. And this is where I mentioned the allegations that RPF have, allegations that TPCP have, and I suppose the allegations I accidentally just put forward with Water Vikings. Whoops. Everyone that could have gone into that final was pissed off. And I think a large part of that is due to just the inaction. And I go into this a lot. This whole section is this and history repeats are pretty much all about leaders that take action versus leaders that don't take action. We had actionable leaders, leaders who would do stuff in the form of MC, Callaway, Epic, Ulti Penguin. If anyone remembers him, he was a big figure, but I hardly hear anyone talk about him now. All those people were very much hands-on, doing what they can. And again, this isn't a shot at Spotty or at Crazy or at Lucifer or at Max, who is now retired. but they kind of just sat on their hands, I think, for the most part. And I think I would like to believe that going forward, at least, Legends Cup was a wake up call.
Yeah,
You
of
know,
course. Very big
I
wake-up
want
call.
I want to see some success out of them because I think the community needs a strong, stable source for where they
Hmm.
can centralize. So now the question is it going to be them or is it going to be this place or is someone else going to come out of nowhere and come up with their own thing, which isn't out of the question. The problem is what's it going to be and how long can we stay in this sort of hole that we're in, and that brings me into I pretty much covered this section and history repeats in one. um, but yeah, history repeats is very important because it ensures that one, you've read B1's post, which again I recommend more than
I
mine.
read it. You know what I did? You know what I did? I was so interested in your post. I read B1's post, and I read all 7 of the fucking posts that B1 linked in his post as context for his post.
Yeah, so you could do that, but really you only need to read his.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to read like a whole novel on this stuff, but like, um, glad you did. First of all, I'm glad you did, but I wouldn't recommend that for most people. Uh, that being said, with he's away. With history repeats, a lot of that is just going over very briefly again what happens at B1's post where he brings up the inaction of Zaxter and the action that he took and even the potentially incorrect action that Funks took. But the difference is, well, that wasn't really his main focus. I sort of made the focus of my post specifically the idea that action versus inaction. That we need leaders who are able to take action. And if these leaders aren't going to take action, someone eventually will come up and take action for them. And if it comes to that, then I guess if you are an admin in CPA or even here and you don't take action, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just how it is. You can't
As a leader,
you can't
of
really
anything,
go around that.
As a serious leader of anything, you need to be ready to take action on stuff within a reasonable bounds.
Yeah, and the reasonable bounds goes back to what Funks did because people will argue that Funk's blacklisting light troops was a huge, huge abuse of power, and to an extent, I agree. That being said, it's hard to figure out what that line is, and eventually, B1 did figure out that line using his influence in a way to say, "Hey, you're either gonna stop being the way you are, or like all 20 of these armies are going to declare war on you." The Klondike Wall, which you can again read about in B1's post. But yeah, I mean that covers that and history repeats, which brings us to going forward, which is sort of where my philosophy comes in. So at this point, I suppose I should cover what I think. Where do you want me to start on where I think what I think army should do?
Start
Like,
from the
what
start.
direction?
Start from what you think needs to be done right now at the basic level, and then move into what you can expand into in the future.
Okay. Now the chances that Spotty or someone is going to sit down and listen to like a 2-hour podcast where I'm like rambling like a madman are very, very low. That being said, on the off chance they do, I mean, regardless.
Listen to him. I don't care which
Regardless
side
of-
listens, but just yeah.
regardless of
advice.
what they do, I'm going to send them a little Google Doc anyway because
That's good,
I
that's
do
good.
genuinely
I
want
think it
the
doesn't
best.
matter necessarily who gets help as long as people are getting assistance to fucking get out of the shithole we're stuck in right now. It's good.
Yeah, this is this is a controversial opinion, I think, but the situation we're in may actually be worse than it was in 2017.
Yeah,
I don't think people are as grim on it because in 2017, nearly every army shut down. It's like, well, I guess that's it, guys. See ya. But with no CPR, we don't have a real place to congregate besides battlegrounds. And I have spoken with Super, and I don't know how much he wants me to say here, but I guess this part isn't really a huge leak. It's more just he's not going to switch this into a general purpose private server, and there's
Of
never going
course.
to be a general purpose private server from him because it just doesn't make sense. because there's too much risk. There's too much risk to jump into the game. At this point.
There needs to be work with other private servers in the future, and I think like CPL, CPF, well, probably CPF because CPL has that little moral issue of who runs it. But even then, new CP is difficult because there's no perfect option private server wise. New CP, everything's perfect, but it's downloadable, so people were sketchy of it. CPL, everything seems perfect, but the owner's a fucking pedophile. And CPF, no issues like that, but it's fucking dead.
Yeah, like, and then even going back to CPR, there was issues. Obviously, there's the allegations.
Well, again, the guy from CPL is the guy from CPR, right?
Yeah, that's my point. Again, first of all allegations. I'm not getting myself.
That's actually, I should mention. I mean, we are not getting sued. I don't want to get sued. This is purely going off of allegations, and this is unproven. But there are documents.
It's unproven. There's no confirmation, but there's a suggestion that it's possible that the owner of CPL is potentially
allegedly
very bad person
yes.
from CPR.
For legal purposes, a very bad person from CPR, and this is something that's been going around since July. Yeah, and we are simply covering it. We are not making any allegations for legal purposes because I don't think either of us want to get sued over this shithole.
No, I don't want that, and I
I'm not going through that again. Not going through that shit again.
listen. Right? It's whatever. Point is, there are security issues. There are not security issues. There are security concerns, and the same thing happened with CPR. But the difference is, by the time we were on CPR, what were we going to do? You know, I think going back, if CPR was still around, we still probably wouldn't even use it.
Yeah.
Because people are just what happened with WaterKid and CPO. It was like a wake up call, I think, and I think to a degree we're almost too cautious for our own good.
Yeah, because it's like we're limiting ourselves in such a way where it's good we're limiting ourselves, but we should be at least running background checks on these 3 private servers, figuring out where we should be recruiting, because the fact that armies have completely sealed themselves away from actual private servers is the fucking stupidest thing I've ever seen. I understand for maybe a year after the CPO issue, but it's been 2 or 3 years since that happened.
I mean, listen, here's the thing, though. We weren't completely sealed away. It's just we haven't found a replacement for CPR. And
we need to find something.
Yeah, I mean, something's got to come. Something's got to give here, because if nothing gives, then
we're going to be stuck like this and we're fucked.
Rough.
We're fucked.
It's going to be rough. So my point really is, I completely forgot what I was talking about. Well, where were we? Was this going forward? Right. This is right. My suggestions. Okay. So, if I was Spotty right now, the first thing I would do is immediately announce, "Hey, we're going to be a lot more transparent." That's the first thing that needs to be done right away, regardless of what happens next. The problems with transparency were made incredibly apparent. They've been around, but no one really cared. This is the first time people really cared and were like, wait a minute, this isn't right. We can't be running like this. So the first thing I would do is make an announcement and say, hey, for the sake of both CPAJ and CPA, I'm going to be a lot more transparent. The admins are going to be a lot more transparent. Head judges are going to be a lot more transparent. End of story. You could stop right there even. And congratulations, you have instantly fixed a lot of your issues. That's your biggest issue by far. Now, the second thing I would do comes into play with the map. And the map is, like I've said before, I think it's dumb, and I think it's incredibly limiting, and it's potentially killing armies, because the problem is we can't really declare war for anything besides the territories on the map. So now no one's declaring war. It just doesn't make sense for us to declare war anymore. We've literally destroyed the purpose of that. So we fix that immediately by getting rid of the map, or even, like I suggested in a Google Doc, PJayo's proposal, which it's floating around somewhere, so I'll probably give you a link to that. We can have a suggestion map where this is who we believe owns these servers and who we believe is in charge of whatever, right? So that's also an option. I think that would actually work, because then what you could see is potentially people will declare war in order to secure their rights to certain servers instead of fighting over, well, we already own this server. Why should we care? So that's the first thing that comes to mind. So there's transparency, there's the map. I would personally also completely drop the league, but I think if you drop the map, the league goes with it. I just don't see how that operates without a map. Because the league is inherently the map, and the map is inherently the league. You can't have one without the other. Because judging is now its own thing. Judging will exist regardless, and I think you should keep
Well,
judging.
I know someone in CPA org was trying to merge CPAJ into CPA org, which is a terrible idea.
Honestly, you know what? I don't even hate that idea. And you're going to hate me for saying that, but I don't hate that idea. Because they already, in my opinion, operate as one.
They do operate as one, yeah.
The thing is, if you're spotty, right, and you need to, or you know what, it could be anyone. It doesn't even need to be spotty. It could be anyone. Let's say you're a CEO, and there's an independent judging organization that covers 2 different leagues, we'll say. If you inhale those judges, congratulations, you are now the definitive best. End of story. No one can compete against you. You are the definitive best organization, and nothing comes close. However, on the other hand, I do get the concern because I wouldn't want to potentially see a league get stamped out in regards to that. But at the same time, if you are a CEO, it is by far the best decision you can make because now you are the one stop, and that's how it worked in the hub. And I would say that's a huge part of why the hub succeeded. But then you go to headquarters, and at this point, the hub is set. At this point, headquarters is separate from the judging, and then you get CPAN. And CPAN was, from my understanding, pretty much just a tool to sort of say like we can leave at any time. And armies did leave. Some co-joined. I think Water Vikings were in both, but I believe Ice Warriors and RPF did completely leave the hub. Not the hub, the headquarters. So it is something that you need to look out for. Going forward, you need full transparency. You need to get rid of the map and protect the league. And then you need to focus more on good posts. Because a good post will get people to talk, and when people talk, that's when you see success. Listen, I posted this long, disturbingly long post, 7,000 words on the Water Viking site, and you will find that on the Water Viking site. It is on no news site, and somehow there's a good chance that more people have seen this post than, let's say, the latest CPA report, which is
the latest one, I believe, is on Red Ravager's reopening.
Yeah, and it's likely more people have seen my post since then. And if we go back to when it happened, the Dark Vikings, I believe, was at the time. No, it would be Aaron Stone's announcement for retirement. More people have probably read my post than Aaron Stone retiring. Sorry, Aaron, but
How many views
they've definitely read more than the finals results, Dark Vikings opening, and Red Ravagers returning.
Mm-hmm. It's just plain
and the fact that I am able to compete on what is effectively just an army site army sites aren't even that important anymore. Most of it's just so we can post a link and be done with it for the top 10. So the fact that the Water Viking site is now a genuine competitor is insane. You need to move up in the media world. Media is such an important part that I think CPA overlooks because their posts generally. Listen, and I'm sure from the few that I've read, they're well written, but the topics just aren't that interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's always like they follow a formula.
Yeah.
And from what I've spoken to multiple reporters who are high up there, privately multiple times, and they all say that. Actually, I wonder if I can get a quote. Let me find a quote from an unnamed individual who I will be keeping.
While you do that, like my point is, they do listen. You look at this is a small thing. You look at the reacts. People react a lot when it comes to the opinion posts, and I don't think they do that enough. It's pretty much McHappy, and that's it. McHappy's been the only one doing it since August. He's the only one been putting out opinions. It's been like once a month, not even. He did it twice in August and then once in September, and that's it. And the opinion posts are incredibly important to the community, and I don't like the fact that they don't do that. My post is an opinion post. I haven't gone all the way through your site, but I'm sure a lot of them are opinion posts. And what I've
There's a
heard,
handful. I try to keep it different.
generally speaking, I've heard good things about the posts on your site, but and here's the thing. No, you go ahead. You go ahead. I'll get into this in a minute.
No, you're good. You're good. I think I try and do the post differently. Where is it?
You need difference, and the big thing the CPA org has right now is a slight legitimacy, right? Because they were
here first.
They were here first. They're evidently larger, and frankly, they are certainly a lot more professional looking.
But they media
And that
game
helps.
fucked up on God. No.
Yeah. And evidently, it's helped them a lot. But if you are in their shoes, if someone up there is listening, then you really need to step up the post quality.
Please
in
do.
terms of content.
I genuinely, I agree.
Because the quality is good. The post quality is good. It's just there's no real interesting topics, and you need to bring in more news. You need to bring in
Innovation.
More, yeah.
Like I got for the podcast, for example. Sorry to cut you off. I got bored one day. I was like, "Hey, you want to film a podcast? I think it'd be funny." And then I hopped on with a couple people I knew, and then literally, I mean, I understand it's just like talking on a VC with someone, but it's genuinely different, interesting shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I got that quote actually from a reporter. You want to get that in? You good?
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
This is from August 4th, 2022. I was talking about how I think you need to have heart and soul in posts. And this reporter, who I think is still like one of the high-up reporters there, direct quote, I'm going to read out the fucking thing. Exactly. You have no idea how much the posts are edited because they don't want to, quote, create bias, end quote. When really, you're just adding personality. I agree completely. When you made the Mercs and the whole thing, a post I did on mercenaries... It's a whole thing on, quality and interesting posts, right? I'm not quoting anymore, but from what I've heard from multiple inside people is that you can write up a post, but any heart and soul gets chopped out into a formulaic kind of thing on the topics, and they really try to avoid topics like that, right? Interesting topics in the name of professionality.
And you know what?
Which is fair.
I gotta say, to a degree, I understand.
I get it. It's like
they're coming off of CPAN.
Yeah.
And when CPAN happened, it was disastrous because it immediately delegitimized the headquarters. Even if CPAN itself didn't really do anything, the fact that armies left and did that was a huge blow.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you have to think, why is that, And I don't think it's because of worries about bias in post. I think it's a dumb way to go about it. And I get it, but the thing is, they're stuck in a very old mindset that it shouldn't apply anymore. And it's the same thing with the judging thing. And you disagree with me on this for potentially different reasons. But for me, I think it's perfectly fine that it's tied to the organization.
I think it's
they don't want
tied.
That. They don't want that because the thing is, there's worries about what if they leave because of a bad judging decision. I
think the balance of power, the only reason I'm really against like CPAG moving into CPA org is I just think there's a balance of power you need to maintain. And I think if you integrate it all together, I'm a big believer in decentralization. I think a judging org should be run separately from media, should be run separately from any sort of like league business, but even then I don't think league should be a thing. I think it should be media, and then media runs tournaments, top 10s, everything, and then judging handles battles. If you have two separate decentralized things, you can negate the purpose for a league.
Right.
But then again, that's just how I think it should be operated. It doesn't even matter. I mean, I could change my opinion on that, but I feel you.
Yeah, it's just there is so many problems, and I think personally a fair amount of them they are afraid to take that next step and really try to do something
different.
Yeah, because they don't again, I said this in the post, they don't want to shake the boat. and that's perfectly fine. I get it.
I get it.
To a degree, you gotta come around and you gotta change things. And another thing is kill the army board. Holy shit, kill
the army board. Put it down. Firing squad. The army board. Everybody on it. No, I'm joking, but still.
Yeah, don't kill everyone on the army board. They're fine.
Only a couple of them. No.
It's just you don't.
It's bureaucracy where bureaucracy isn't needed. They just it is the unnecessary addition
that we
of
can't
bureaucracy.
afford to have slow down.
Yeah, it is unnecessary bureaucracy that gets added in for the sake of padding egos and giving power. I genuinely think the army board and whatever community board that is there is unnecessary. I understand the approach trying to give power to the army leaders, but it was executed in such a poor manner. For one, the Army League Board is where all the leaders make internal decisions and things that should be announced to the public. And on the transparency issue, you never find out what the fuck goes on there. The only reason I know what happens to the Army Board is because I have a leak from an army there. And I've had people, for the record, it's not Zing and it's not the best. I've had people ask me if it was them before. But I think it's done in such a poor manner and it's not transparent enough. And let alone, I just think it's unnecessary, right? It's just not needed.
It's just... I think it's such a waste of time,
and
it's not in our interest anymore. Whether or not that it had good intentions or whatever, but I think it's genuinely almost like a cancer that is formed in regards to the merge, because then you had the league aspect of the CPAL merge with the bottom up aspect of CPAM, and it just didn't work out. Generally speaking, if I had to pick one thing I advocate for more than anything else, it's the idea of potentially returning to something like you would see in old CPAC. But the problem is, and I had this conversation with Super, and I understand where he's coming from on this. The problem is, you need legitimacy for that, and you need people to believe that this is the real deal, you know. And if people aren't going to believe that it's the real deal, and that it's the go-to place, then you're gonna have issues, because it's just, you know, it's very much influence-based, that sort of thing. You need to have that influence. If you can't have that influence, then I guess that's it, you know. That's pretty much the basis for everything. It's just sort of a return to form, which is funny because now going back to something like that is very much a controversial opinion. When back in the day, it was controversial, but on the other end, where it was like, CPAC has too much power, you know? And even the idea of a CPAC of any kind in itself is controversial to a degree. That sort of let's just go back to media approach. And the fact that has now become controversial. And that's not to say I don't want an influential community leader, you know? A lot of people just want to go straight, fuck it, who cares, let's do whatever. I personally think that it still needs to be centralized. It's just the league itself needs to go.
Yeah.
You have too many rules for it. It's burdening. The forced treaties and treaties in general kind of suck. No one wants to write them anymore. Forced treaties will be
abolished under my dictatorship. No.
There you go. Yeah, I would, if I was a dictator, I would do the same shit. And from my understanding, I hear there is a chance that there's a push for forced treaties to vanish. So, you know what? Maybe that's a good first step. But it's also happening under the Army Board. I would prefer if it just happened on its own. If they would sort of have a moment where they realize, wait a minute, let's just fucking kill the Army Board.
Well, the issue is that's like asking Congress to abolish Congress. They're never going to abolish themselves. Because I know people on the Army Board who dislike and disagree with the Army Board, but have specifically said to me before, it's like, well, I have more power on the Army Board, so may as well just devolve keep it. That's the mindset of board people, for the most part.
Yeah, and you know what? I understand.
Fair enough, but still, I don't think it's good.
I understand it, but the problem is, I think we need to come together as a community and realize that this isn't going to help us anymore. It's overstayed its welcome. It's got to go. We got to give power to the CEOs, and if the CEOs are competent, which I genuinely do think that they are, it's just either one can't do anything or two don't want to do anything. I think if they get it together, it has a chance. And if it has a chance, that's better than it's been for the last 3 months. It's been rough. We've had a rough time. So now it's just what do we do now? That's what it all comes down to.
What really can you do with the modern day? And yeah, I think it's just so much of the incompetence and issues they have with the Army Board is really chipping away at the integrity of the community and chipping away at, what remains of the community. Because frankly, the things we need to do, we need to fix the organizational issues with whatever org, league, whatever. Hopefully abolish the league and do something other than a map. And from there, you get things under control to where we're not killing ourselves, we're not just destroying ourselves. And then we need to start thinking outward, stop, isolating ourselves, right?
I actually have a very controversial opinion here. Are you ready for this one?
Let's hear it.
I don't like the idea of, regardless of the situation, not having certain armies on the top 10. And this is, I don't need to name names as to who's not on the top 10. We're thinking it.
Recon Federation, Redemption Force.
Yeah, pretty much. I listen. I am strongly opposed to even their existence. Listen, anyone will tell you that if you could dig up.
I think Prior Bumble should be euthanized. I think we should roll Prior Bumble down a hill. That's what I think.
I think that's a little harsh, but I do think that something needs to be done. How do I put this? Anyone will tell you that I have been pretty much against RFCP's existence since as long as I found out that they existed.
Yeah,
I was a part of the group with Crazy and Pookie in order to just kill them off, And
I just think, as a matter of principle, once you exclude a army, then it opens the floodgates to excluding other armies. And I understand that mindset. As much I have a firm disposition for the Recon Federation for Prior Bumble, but it's like, I understand what you're saying when you think that it's like, if it is a top 10 of all the armies, there are like 12 armies or 13 armies, but when 5 of them aren't counted or get excluded by an org, it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the top 10, I mean, listen, not reporting on them is one thing, I think it's perfectly okay to refuse to report on their activities.
Of course.
But the top 10, I think, needs to be
sacred.
A sacred thing. It's personally, I think it's just something that doesn't get touched. I've had this conversation with Zing too, I believe. And for the most part, my understanding is he agrees, although at the same time, that was a long time ago, and given recent developments, it's possible that he and I share different opinions on that now. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but as far as I'm aware, I'm not the only one who thinks it, at least,
Yeah, I understand that, and I think in the case of Redemption Force, it's a lot more justifiable than in the case of RFCP. I don't even know if they still hold events, they're so isolated, but yeah, I think it's difficult.
It's certainly a thing, and it's weird because Thunks at one point did that with light troops for a week. It was a single week, and it was so controversial that he had to reverse it within that week. But, here we are now, and we have multiple armies that unfortunately do exist, but they exist. So you can't, that's my take. You can't ignore them. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
That's really my most controversial opinion, I suppose.
So, I notice here, I'm looking at the section of the post, history repeats right now.
Right.
You want to tell me about that?
All right, yeah, you missed my talk on history repeats.
Did you talk about that?
So,
okay, in that case, give me like a TLD. I don't want to waste time. Give me like a 30-second summary.
Okay, 30-second summary. The idea is there is a cycle. A leader takes action. The actionable leader earns influence. Influence is inherited by those new leaders. New leaders abuse their inherited influence. And the inaction by those leaders who inherited the influence leads to decay. And in that decay, you have new leaders who will take action in order to fix
different armies. Yeah, the army cycle. That's pretty basic. Yeah, I agree with
that. Yeah. So it's just, I'm just paraphrasing from this author, Michael Hopp, who I'm sure you've heard this quote before. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times.
Yeah.
Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. It's the same thing.
It is the same principle, and I think it's true. I think it applies to a lot of situations, and I think it applies here.
It especially applies to armies, I believe. I think, if anything, you could argue maybe that's not the case in truly historical context, you can argue maybe it's a little too face value, but for armies, it's definitely the case
Mm-hmm.
because it is a leisure activity. You know, people. This isn't supposed to be something that we do as a job. So this is just something that we do because we want to. So the fact that we get lazy with it makes sense that it's going to fall apart. That's just how it is. And that's pretty much the summary of History Repeats. The idea is that Zach's there at the time, and I spoke to Zach actually about this not too long ago because he read my post. Again, one of the fucking like dozens of DMs I got over the last week. He read my post and he said, "Yeah, it pretty much sums it up. I was not at all interested in this by the end of it, and I just didn't want to be." He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be the guy, and he just sort of let it sit and fester. And he owned up to that, and I think that's pretty much what we're seeing here. Even if Spotty or Crazy or Lucifer want to help, right? Regardless of what that really is, regardless of if they want to help or not, they at the moment they aren't helping, and that's. Obviously, it's not just this. F6 did it. I believe Cali did it too. We've ever since the end of 2020, we've sort of been in a cycle of, well, I guess who's up next and who's going to just sit there and do nothing while the situation gets worse. And hopefully, someone takes action. That's pretty much the basis of History Repeats and going forward.
Mm-hmm. So. What's next? Going forward, what do you think about going forward in conclusion to this monster of a post?
Going forward, I pretty much just talked about it. It was just my opinions on where we should go. And for the most part, it's just we need to reverse the league. That's pretty much what going forward is. We need to reverse the league. We need more transparency.
Reverse the league more. That's exactly what I agree with. Like what I run here, I wouldn't call it a league at all. I am firmly against the concept of a league. It's news and media that has some hands in other activities, but it is not a league.
I strongly dislike the idea of a league, and I always have.
I just think it's unnecessary. Like I said, it's unnecessary.
I think judging was a fantastic call.
Yes, that's true.
It's just the league itself has proven not to be worth our time, and the problem is no one up top wants to admit that that's the case, or at least outright say it.
No one wants to say or admit publicly that the league is a failure. Any league has been a failure. The only reason they base it, like I said, you said it earlier, they based it off of CPOAL. The only reason CPOAL worked is because if you didn't go with it, you didn't work. You were fucked. You were gone. You were, like you said, reduced to atoms, like burnt to ashes. So in the modern sense, that's not possible. That doesn't happen anymore.
It just doesn't add up.
So
theoretically, I suppose you could lock them out, because we do have battlegrounds, but that would require Super to agree with that, and I've known Super long enough. I don't think he's going to agree with that. So, yeah, I would say going forward, we need to sort of reevaluate what we have because I don't think a league is going to work out. That's just my take. I'm sure people have different opinions.
But that's the beautiful thing about CPA. You can have different opinions, right?
You can do whatever. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the post. That pretty much covers everything.
Fuck! Hurt my finger.
Good job.
Sorry. We're good.
So
I think that post is definitely an interesting and important post in doctrine when it comes to what to do in the future. Right? Can I ask how many views this post got?
We don't have a view counter.
You don't?
I can't see statistics. I think we have something, but that would require me to look at IPs, and I feel morally.
I feel you.
Looking at that, so I try to stay away from that. It's pretty much it crawls for bots, but it also can show you who real people are, just to make sure that they are real. And I want to say though, I've gotten something like 24. I've gotten DMs from 24 different people, 25 about that.
Yeah, so that you can tell it's probably in the hundreds then, because only a handful of people DM.
Yeah, I've seen people from all sorts of corners of the community. Off the top of my head, the Cappy superhero, Zach, obviously.
I was in your
Epic
DMs about it. I
came
know
to me.
that. I was in your DMs.
Yeah, that's how this whole thing started. So It's I'm glad that it's spreading around because I do believe that we need to wake up and sort of do something about this because we can't just keep sitting here and pretending that everything's okay.
That's what I've been saying, but it seems people enjoy sitting here.
Well, listen, from my understanding, right, some of the admins of CPA have been the ones that DM me. So
Thank God.
I'd like to believe that this is going to be a step in the right direction. I would like to believe that I have, at least in some way, helped this process because someone needed to take the first step, and no one had been taking the first step. I've been wanting to say something for months, and finally, with what happened in Legends Cup, I couldn't help it. I had to make the post, and here we are, 7,000 words later, a week later.
I think it's definitely going to be important for a step in the right direction. I agree with you. But,
it's just, I hope something is done. There's no guarantee anything will be done. But like I said in the post, I do believe that if nothing is done with these group of people, someone else will step up. It could be this organization, it could be someone else. It doesn't really matter. But someone's going to have to do something because otherwise, really it's just a repeat of 2015 and beyond, where you saw Zaxter sort of let it fester, and then you got Mock, Gob, Zen King, etc. Where it just sort of nothing happened, and then catastrophic event happens, and then it's sort of a fresh cycle. So this is the first time we've been through that fresh cycle, but I mean, slumps are completely normal in the community, is the thing. It's just, to have one that goes on this long is a little scary. That's the only thing. I was there I saw the aftermath. I was there in 2012 as a rogue for ACP. I had seen that. I had been there in the growth period of 2013, and I was there in the slump of 2014. Then I was there for the growth period of 2015. Then I saw the slump of 2016 and 2017. That didn't even really happen. It was too long gone. And then we pretty much sat there until a brief moment in 2018, and then really in 2019, that's when you saw it pick up again. And then COVID happened, and it really brought life into the community. But the problem is, I think, a lot of the new people aren't accustomed to the idea of a slump, and
they are not used to it. I mean, I've noticed that. Like, generally, my opinion of people who were like doing things actively in CPA, you have people from like 2015 and before, the old guard. You have the new guard from like 2019 to now. Those are the two major groups. But then you have like 5-ish people, off my count, like of actual like relevant stuff, like doing stuff. There are like 5 people who from like 2016, 2017, 2018 who are like actively doing shit.
Yeah.
And the people that come to mind are myself, Dino, and Wikiboy. So it's like this small roster.
Yeah, and it's like,
so
all
a lot of
they've seen up until
to
2020 was a slump. It was a very long,
exactly. So a lot of the people like who joined 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, they have. You got to
assume this is jarring for them.
Yeah, exactly. They're probably all fucking like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? Anyone else from 2018 and before can be like, yeah, this is a fucking slump. Give it a year and it'll be good.
Well, I don't want to say it'll be good, but I do think.
I hope it'll be good. I don't know. I've been through slumps before. I've been through slumps. I've been out here.
The question is, do we have a way to get out of it this time? You know,
I think there is a way to get out of it. I just think the bureaucracy is really stifling getting out of it.
Right.
There is always a way to get out of a situation. It's just you got to be able to work for it and look for it.
I'm hoping that something changes because I'm pretty much done. Like I said earlier, I've accomplished what is effectively a fucking Hall of Fame run, right? I wouldn't say I deserve legend, but I would say that I have done pretty much everything you could imagine you need to do, right? I was in a final, top end of the top 10. I was nominated for legend. I was in this post, you know. I revived a major army. I was a part of a major generation. I had done pretty much everything you need to do. I don't think I deserve legend, and I'm never going to call for that. But that being said, I still want to watch this. I still want to see where this goes. And
I still want to contribute.
The fact that it might die by the time I'm gone is mildly upsetting, you know. And I want to see it succeed at least for another generation, even if it's impractical. So that's pretty much why I made the post. Now the question is this going to get anywhere, and how are we going to go forward? I hope something happens. That's all.
Yeah, it's difficult because you never really know, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
shitty. But I mean, on the bright side, at least we'll get some interesting shit, right?
Well, I don't even know. I don't know what's left that can be interesting in this sort of environment.
Well, really, the
The
fight.
closest thing we've gotten is the changing of the guard, where Water Vikings and Templars are sort of the top guys now.
Yeah.
And while that's cool, they're top. They're on top in a slump. And the same thing happened with the Water Vikings in late 2015, 2016, where they were the biggest army, sure, with the Dark Warriors, but it didn't really matter because the community was on its last legs. And I'd rather not see the army that I choose to call home be a harbinger of fucking doom. You know, I want to see success. That's all. And
Yeah.
I'm not even calling for 100 pluses again. I'm simply calling for let's get some armies in here. Let's bring some life back into it because the size of the armies is perfectly fine. If there's one thing I would say, we need to open up the top 10 again to just everyone. And I know Zing is probably gonna fucking strangle me for this. I almost would say, much like UMA did in 2007, split into two armies. You know, obviously, killing his child is a very strong thing, but from a purely clinical sense, where let's say I have no respect for what he's done, and I do, but let's say I didn't. I would say split it in half because then you have two armies of 25 and 30, and now the community is a lot more competitive, and there's potential for growth, and you can totally keep it aligned. It's just with East Rome, West Rome situation. That's how I would do it. I don't know, and that's from a purely community perspective, not the perspective of the Templars, because I know for a fact it's like the last thing he would want to do. But that's how I see it.
I agree with that. I see that. I mean, I wouldn't say split it up, but I could see why you would see that as an option. It makes sense. And at this point, it's like, you want to just slowly collapse and die, or you want to like.
No, I mean, I don't think the Templars are even close to collapsing.
Exactly,
I
but I
think
just
they're in store for a golden age. However,
well, yeah, golden age, but armies as a whole. I mean, like
armies as a whole are suffering, and I almost would say if the admins aren't going to do anything, then fine, fuck it. Let's just split the Templars, and then we are effectively a healthy community again. Because then there's real competition for first. Because no one's really coming close right now. I mean, the Water Vikings can put in work, but the Templar is effectively the largest army right now, and that's perfectly fine. It's just, there is, to a degree, you can see where I'm coming from, and I'm not actually recommending that he do this. I'm simply saying it is theoretically a solution.
I get it. I feel what you're saying.
It's a part
of
it.
I don't think a lot of people get, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so difficult, right? Because we're stuck in a situation where it's like, what else can we do?
Yeah. I mean, listen, on the low end, you have armies like LGA, Dark Vikings, etc., and they're technically doing okay. Here's the thing. Theoretically, in any other scenario, this community is perfectly fine. Because the army sizes are there, the manpower is there. It's just we are so totally fucked up by the last 2-3 years that we refuse to fix it, and we are starting to shrink because of it. And I think we need to take that next step, and we need to fix it. That's pretty much all I have to say on the matter.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. The community has kind of degenerated itself to such a degree where it's like, what else is there to do, right? Which is why I'm always open for new solutions. I'm always open for different fixes, obviously. But it's like, I feel like the difficulty comes when people don't. I know some people who don't think there are any problems. I know people who know there are problems and are just like, shit, nothing we can do. There's always something you can do, right? I feel like it's just laziness. Not laziness, but they don't want to fix it.
Right.
Well, because why would they want to fix it? They're in power. Why would they want to fix it?
Yeah, and that it's the same thing that happens all the time.
Power corrupts.
Yeah, I mean, it happened with CPAC at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not impossible.
Yeah, it's shitty, but yeah, you get it. I mean, it's so difficult. It's such a difficult thing, but I mean, yeah, I'm just repeating myself. But I think armies as a whole, I have faith that there will be recovery after a little bit, and that eventually, like you said, if what you said is true about Rocket Snail, you will have earned my trust. I'll get a PJayo tattoo with my Rocket Snail tattoo if you're right on that.
I would like to be right because that means we have a safe way to go.
Because if there is an official remaster bring back of like actual CP, I mean actual Club Penguin, like undeniably we've survived for 5 years without a private server, without the actual official server. Private servers come and go, but if it actually came back in a proper way,
even if it's Disney, I honestly don't
even
care.
if it's Disney, I don't care. If they bring something back that functions like
having something sustainable. Having something sustainable is the biggest thing.
Because right now we've basically been squatting private server to private server, trying to find something that works, and we're running out of fucking houses.
Yeah. Now we're starting to get into the shadier neighborhoods, and no one really wants to be there, so we're staying in our little cardboard box. That's pretty much what it is right now. And you know what? It's a nice cardboard box. It's a really nice cardboard box. Thank you, Super, for making this cardboard box.
That's true. I should say that. Thank you, Super. This is the best cardboard box we could have gotten.
But it is still a cardboard box, and there's no way for this to grow.
I would even argue if they returned an official Disney or Rocket Snail sanctioned Club Penguin, like, why don't we keep CPAB for tournament battles?
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me.
Have it for tournament battles and keep CPAB sustained, so that way it's like, yeah, when tournaments come around, we can boot up the servers and have an uninterrupted tournament battle. But war battles, for example, should be fought. Everything else should be done on the fucking official thing. Yeah, I think there will be something official, or there will be another private server. But I know it's all a thing of hope, right?
You have no way of telling.
No, I'm gonna go look up on Google right now. Rocket Snail Club Penguin.
I think it was a tweet he made.
Anything in news?
A year or two ago.
Man, that's wild. An article from 2020. Club Penguin, your favorite childhood game, is making a comeback. Oh, it's rewritten. Never mind.
Yep.
Black pilled again.
There is no winning here.
Let me see if Rocket Snail Twitter. I'm gonna go to his Twitter right now. Rocket Snail. Oh, I know he's doing Box Critters, but let's see.
Here's the thing with Box Critters. I think Box Critters is going to be a success. My only issue is going to be, how do I put this? It's not Club Penguin.
Yeah, exactly. It's different. It's just such a jarring difference in culture, right?
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. You know what? Okay, yeah. Maybe there'll be Box Critter armies. Who knows?
Yeah,
BCA,
there have been attempts at that. I'm looking at his Twitter right now. I mean. There's got to be something.
It's just.
Do you know when this tweet was?
It was like years ago. Years ago. This.
Oh wait, here it is. I was asked today if I would ever consider crowdfunding a new virtual world like Club Penguin. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Rocket Snail. The funny thing is, Rocket Snail. He lives in Kelowna. Kelowna is like only a couple hours drive from where I live. Rocket Snail is from he's from BC. Like I wonder.
There's your next interview target.
Yeah, that's true. How long would it take? Yeah, 3 hours and 52 minutes to drive to Kelowna.
Right.
Do you think that would be like a quality post if I like made a whole video or documentary driving to Kelowna to interview Rocket Snail and armies?
I don't know if people would take an interview about armies.
Or just overall about Club Penguin where I mention armies. But I think that would be some crazy shit for the army community if I managed to find him.
I mean, see, it's not hard. He doesn't really hide.
He didn't really hide. I know where he is. It's just the effort of driving for 4 hours to get there with gas prices these days.
Yeah, it would be something. So, yeah, I guess to summarize everything, we need to make a change. That's pretty much the end of it.
And if we don't make a change...
Everything comes down to we need to change, and if we don't change, we're in for some hard times, and that's all. That's pretty much the end of it. There was a few things I wanted to talk about, though. I think it was LGA. I have a long history with LGA. I fought them in a war in 2014 with my own homemade Army of the Dragons. You can probably find that post somewhere.
Yeah.
And then right now, they've certainly been controversial.
I love Greenie. I've always had good relations with Greenie. I think he's off his meds. I think he's off his mind. He's a
I
lost
think.
shit.
Listen, Greeny's been nothing but nice to me.
Yeah, same. I've had no bad experience
The
with them
only
until
thing
recently.
I could say is there was that brief moment where it looked like they were entirely intertwined with RFCP, and
And even then, it's like you've got people who are deeply affiliated with RFCP in the LGA server. I mean, Cena's in there.
yeah, no, it's still happening. But, how do I put it? Apparently, allegedly, it's
Sorry.
completely collapsed between them. So
LGA
good for
or-
LGA. No, I mean apparently relations have completely frozen.
I hope so. I've heard a little bit about it, but even then, I think he's
I think Joe Terry or whatever.
Thank God he's finally done something fucking useful for once.
He made a. You could probably ask for a Google Doc. You'll have it. It's this big thing where he sort of this.
I would say that Green, he's a stubborn guy. More than anything, he is a stubborn guy.
That's a good way to put it.
You know that. I know that. I remember when I had my split with RPF in 2019, I got to hide in the LGA server for a week. Bless Greeny's soul. Because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that. I would have just dipped out. Greeny harboring my ass in 2019 is very, very nice. But...
So, listen, I just think... Listen, I mean, fuck, if there's anyone still listening to this podcast by this point...
If someone who listens to this whole fucking podcast, like... I'll buy them Nitro. I'm not going to mention it. I will buy... Whoever manages to get this far, I will buy Nitro. Just DM me privately if you actually do get this far. And I know you got this far.
Here. I'm going to say a word. I'm going to say a single word. And it's going to be... It's going to be 3 words, actually. It's 2 words. 2 words. No, 3 words. Precise Pilot Pen. If you DM B-Sharp, Precise Pilot Pen, no context, he will give you Nitro.
Yeah.
There's your warning. There's your warning.
There's your warning. Precise Pilot Pen. If you can DM me that word, those 3 words, then I will give you a month of Discord Nitro.
Continuing though, let's talk.
Continuing, let's talk
relations.
Yeah, let's talk
LGA. And fuck it, let's talk foreign relations of RFCP. The problem is if you associate them with them immediately, you're totally boned because
You're Hitler.
two biggest armies right now, Templars and the Water Vikings, are the most anti-RFCP armies
Ever.
in the entire community.
Yeah.
I was on a fucking crusade against them.
So was I, yeah.
Aaron was as well.
Yeah, we were all in that crusade back then. We were all out there.
I can assure you, Dino will be doing the exact same thing. Whether he knows it or not, he will do it.
He will continue the policy, and I was the same way.
That's just how it happens. So, the second you associate with them, you lose out immediately among those two. And
ACP as well for a large part, because ACP is very tight with people like Kaylee and other people who escaped RFCP.
Yeah. Like, pretty much every major army is like, you associate with them, we're not associating with you. That's the end of the story. It's an official policy in the Water Vikings. If you associate with them, we consider you an enemy immediately. No questions asked. Just happens. You can look it up. Aaron made a post a few months ago, right before the SWAT thing happened. And this is when SWAT was associating with them too, very briefly, with the Toxic Storm. So it's not like this is unprecedented what I'm saying here. So, listen, you associate with them, that's it. You're done. You don't make it out of that. So in LGA's example, they were so heavily associated that it could have potentially tainted them. Because as far as I know, they're separate. But the wider community consensus is still LGA needs to go. Regardless of if what I'm saying is true or not, that just seems to be where people are. And of course, that's just going to continue happening. Even now, by associating with LGA, you're now putting yourself in hot water because they have been so heavily associated with RFCP. It's complicated. For LGA's sake, I hope that their ties are completely cut, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, it's like as much as I beefed with LGA recently, and I've never had any bad issues with Greeny until he started talking shit to me and fucking threatening the fucking kid Thunder when I got in his ass about that. But I hope to God he can cut the ties, get his fucking head on straight, and work his way back in normally.
Yeah, I because LGA is a historic small medium army. It's been around for long enough. It sucks that this is where they've gone. That's what I have to say on that.
I agree. I feel like there's 1 or 2 more things you wanted to talk about and touch on.
There was LGA. I think that's it, actually. I can't think of anything, at least.
Yeah, I think we covered everything, yeah.
Or the post. The post took like half of that. Um, yeah. I guess that's it.
Well, I mean, thank you for coming on the podcast. How long have I been running this for? I can't even check.
At least 3 hours.
Probably. 2 hours and 19 minutes. Wow.
Yeah,
That's wild. This is a fucking great podcast, though. This is really informative. I think if anyone gets that far, that they will gain a lot of information. I feel like everyone in a position of power or high up influence should listen to this, just so they, they can kind of, get their doctrine right. Fucking, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. I don't really want to take sides in anything that comes up. I just want to say
Exactly.
I understand that there's people in both sides of both CPA and this new CPAC, I suppose. With this
Hey, remember. I am in the process of fixing that. For people who are hard asses about the name, I'm fucking fixing that. I know. I'm working on it.
Oh, we can talk about that. Then I actually
sure, yeah. I'm waiting on GFX. I gotta pick between 3 names I got. I'm waiting on my GFX, and we're fucking fixing it.
Don't spoil the options.
I'm not going to spoil the options, but we're almost there.
Since Be Sure here came and talked to me, I've been trying to help him in regards to what comes next, and a big part of that is the rebrand. And I hope that when it comes out, people will take this thing a lot more seriously, and I hope people will consider it. Because I'd like to see this succeed, as well as much as I'd like to see CPA succeed.
I want to see both sides succeed.
I refuse to take sides in this.
Yeah, I want to see both sides.
I understand that on both sides of the aisle, there are people who want to see the other one dead. But for me personally, I just want to see the community come out on top.
You see, for me, it's a win-win because I think about it like this. For me, it's a win-win because if we succeed, no shit, it's a win. We succeeded. But even if they succeed, and even if we don't, I don't fucking care because at least someone's doing something right.
Exactly. That's where I stand.
So I don't really care. I am cool with anything. Yeah, I'm cool. I don't care. But either way, the only reason I ever got into media, I've never been a media guy. Only did it because, frankly, they have been fucking up for months, and I'm done with it.
I wouldn't say they've been. I don't know how.
There have been a bunch of mistakes. There was Beach Brawl. There's Legends Cup. There's a bunch of administrative issues. There's the Army Board issues. There's the banning issues of certain people. I mean, there's walkbacks. There's leaking. There's so much shit.
It needs to be entirely redone, and I hope that regardless of what it may appear in regards to this post and even the podcast, I hope that they'll still listen to me and they'll take my advice because I do want to see them succeed in the same way I want to see this place succeed. I will not. Yeah, that's where I stand.
Well, anyways, this was another episode of Cove Chats with B Sharback 2. I'd like to thank PJayo for coming on for multiple hours to really lay down the law about all this and expose the New World Order.
Is that where we're going with this?
I like to theme it like that. I like to go for the Alex Jones aesthetic. You know how it is.
All right.
The globalists, PJayo.
I mean, listen. If anything, I'm part of that elite, so be careful.
That's true. You're like the Yay equivalent. Anyways, okay, that was the podcast. Thank you. I'm gonna go lie down on my couch because I'm still fucking sick. Have a good one, everybody.